Hello and welcome. While Europe and America have in recent times seen economically tough times, the BRICS countries, Brazil, India, Russia, China and South Africa, have been seeing growth. My guest today has been advising companies from overseas and India about doing business, not just in India, but globally. And he believes that opportunities today exist almost everywhere. Welcome, Ajay.
Hi, Vikram.
You've been analyzing the Indian growth story for many years now, and you have in fact been advising corporates, both Indian and foreign, on how they should position themselves, not just with the financial sector and the tax story, but also in general business terms. How do you see the current situation, especially after our latest budget that has been presented by the government?
Personally, Vikram, I don't think the budget is going to dampen or excite anybody either ways, because budget is more or less a stable kind of an approach.
But it does give you policy and direction.
It does. And from that viewpoint, I'll pick up that policy part in a second. But let me tell you what is the good side. If you look at the World Economic Forum report, which talks about BRIC nations, India has gone far ahead of China on 12 pillars which they value India on. That's a good side. The only country out of the 4 which is ahead of us is Russia, the Russian Federation. So that's the good side, which means the world's interaction with us is pretty positive. Now coming to the policy part which you asked me just now. The policy part, the only part which I feel we could have done a little better, introduction of the law by itself rather than bits and pieces. Let me pick up one, the direct tax code. I would have loved it if it would have been introduced straight into the law. Now what we have done is we extracted bits and pieces from the law and we have put it into our income tax law as it exists now. You know what happens when you take a car and take away some pieces and add some. You never get the perfect car. You want your Audi, you better buy an Audi. That's where I think we have kind of missed the boat somewhere. That's my first feeling on these policies.
But do you think that the growth story of India, as it has been talked about globally, will now accelerate, or are you perhaps concerned that it may not take off the way people have been expecting it to?
No, I think the growth story will go in whatever direction it was scheduled to go. The budget impact on the growth story is not going to be there. I don't think so. I think the growth story is pretty good India has. I have been dealing with Japanese corporates for very long, and I see the excitement level is already touching a high. They look at India as a huge market. Their respect and their liking for India has increased many-fold over the last few years. So I see that story going as it is. Europe's interaction with India have been very high. If they have held back last year, because we do see the graph slightly on the downward curve, it is not on account of lack of love or affection or desire to do business here, simply because they are not doing well as an economy themselves. I don't think anybody is going to stop coming to India because the policy, because frankly I don't think my finance minister has given any super negative indication to the outside world. He's simply done with the limited choices he had with him. He did some tinkering around here and there, but frankly, if you ask me, thank God he didn't mess around with the policies much more than he already did. I have my opinions there, but frankly I'm quite okay with them right now.
When you say that the economy has been doing well and it's on the growth path and will continue on that trajectory, where do you see the economy go in the next year or two?
Frankly, I think they have given a budget estimate in the economic survey of 7.6% growth rate. I personally feel it is extremely easily achievable, provided there are certain factors which have to help us. One is external, which we cannot control. One of them is Euro crisis. I cannot control that. Nobody can control that. We cannot control investments coming from outside because we are competing, don't forget, with other nations. Brazil is very attractive nowadays for many countries. What we can control is policy matters. Reforms have to be slightly accelerated. Things like insurance, things like retail, these are the issues which the government has to handle. Now I know where the government is tied up politically, but that is not a good enough answer for the outside world. We have to show some political will to take on some reforms and take it head on. Now these are the things which will send a signal, and if we are going like this on the growth trajectory, these changes would put us on this kind of a growth trajectory. We could very well do better than 7.6, but it all depends on what kind of political will we bring to the table now.
When you talked about the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, of course they're all growing economies, but can you really bundle them together because they have very little in common, or so some people say.
Yes.
The acronym, of course, has caught on. The countries are working together, but when you look at, let's say, people-to-people interaction between these regions, there isn't much. So while the governments could be very close, do you think that could be a challenge, getting the people together?
I don't think so. Personally, these are competitive economies. We work for and against each other. There is no way we are going to work together as some happy family and like a joint Hindu family and trying to achieve success together. It's never going to happen. Two, India must visualize what we can do better. Let's take up an example. And since I told you I work with Japanese companies a lot, I'll use that as a base and give you an example. In China, I'm given to understand there are 22,000 Japanese companies. So they have kind of matured, they have done what they had to do, they made their statements, and they're already doing business. Now let's compare it with India. On the best side, we have about 2,000, 2,500 Japanese companies operating in India. Now just see the gap. So there is a huge opportunity which needs to be tapped if India was to analyze it in this particular manner. Where is what has done? Which countries invested there? Secondly, coming direct to the issue which you picked up, when a businessman is investing into a country or he's got surplus money, if I had surplus money, I go and do my little shopping in the market. Shall I put it into gold? Should I put it into property? Should I put it there? Same as a businessman. Take away all these BRIC nations, take away everything, put it down to a businessman. He says, listen, if I put my money in Brazil, I get this much. If I put it in China, I get this much. And I give it in India, I get this much. That's the kind of homework he does. We better be attractive to him. We better not try to be attractive to the whole world economies per se. That's where I think we miss out on the policies. We do not know which man we want to come in. So let's say if we were to identify IT companies or let's say auto, we make policies which are attractive to that businessman, not the general kind of a thing for everybody.
But do you think when you look at it today the world over, most of the economies are not doing very well apart from the BRICS? So if you look at America, well, it has shown some rebound recently, but still it's not as attractive perhaps. Europe still has its problems. Japan, on the other hand, has its problems following the natural disaster that was very unfortunate. So where is the thrust today? It is really back to the BRICS, isn't it?
Yes, it is, no doubt. Undoubtedly, the market is here. But remember, all these European countries, one thing is I always like to clarify before we get too. I have noticed a tendency we fall too much in love with statistics. And I've seen this tendency of this 6 and 9 and 8% growth rates. We Indians tend to fall quickly in this trap. And I would always say a word of caution. Never forget we are a developing economy. And this 8% ultimately is applied to an absolute number. So when you apply 8 to let's say $1 million and you apply 1 to $1 trillion, which is what is in my case I would say a developed nation, you get different results. So let's never fall into the trap of the growth rate because they do not define the absolute numbers the economy is earning by itself. And finally, and more importantly, as a nation, we have this growth trajectory which is based on industrial growth now. That is where our focus should be. We should not focus on what BRICS will do or what others will do. Focus on industry. If your industry goes up and your agriculture by God's grace is doing well, you're on the right path. So that's what my